From WHYY, it is Hittin season. Hey there, podcast pals. I'm John Stolnis from The Good Phight. You can follow me on X and Blue Sky at John Stolnis. Pitchers and catchers reporting this week. Right now, even as you're listening to this podcast, Phillies pitchers and catchers are reporting down to Clearwater. And so as the Phillies get ready to start spring training 2026, we here at Hittin Season will do a little bit of a spring training preview for you on this episode of the podcast. We'll take a look at some of the biggest Phillies question marks heading into spring training and get a quick look at a couple of non-roster invitees that we think maybe has the best chance of making an impact here in 2026. I'm not going to lie to you. A lot of the folks you're going to see them with numbers in the hundreds in spring training and never see them again. But maybe there's one or two here that'll pop during the course of the spring. There's always those spring training heroes that end up batting .645 and getting 70 at bats during the course of the spring because they were going to every road game and playing in every single split doubleheader. And then those guys never end up doing anything. But maybe there'll be one or two. So we'll go over some of those names. And also Dave Dombrowski and Rob Thompson made a little bit of news on the Zack Wheeler front and the Nick Castellanos front and even the Gage Wood front. So we'll start the show off with that here in just a second. I know, the Gage Wood front. Get ready, everybody. Joining me for this episode of the podcast, a smaller roundtable tonight, but Justin Klugh, he of Baseball Prospectus and author of the new book, Summer of the Cheap Wieners. Get it at brooklinebooks.com. It's time. It's here. It's ready to rock and roll. Justin, spring training is also here. Seems to me maybe you timed these two things out so that they happen together.
Boy, the people in marketing are just, there's a reason they do what they do.
It's a reason they make the upper five figures, my friend.
Yeah, there was a minute where the other day I was thinking about pitchers and catchers are reporting, book's coming out soon. The book is about baseball. Hey, wait a second. You don't think they they timed that on purpose?
Yeah.
Huh. Wow, that's just brilliant. As soon as football ends and we're all very much in the mood to watch baseball, it's funny how that happens. But yeah, now you too can get not only Summer of the Cheap Wieners, but also the BP Annual, which is now arriving in on people's front doorsteps. The essential guide to every Major League Baseball season, and this year it's no different. Unfortunately, Aaron Judge is on the cover of the book this year. Huge bummer. But other than that, if you can get past that, a lot of great essays and player comments in there. So, that's nothing makes me truly, I know I'm biased, but nothing makes me feel like, the part where baseball is gearing up and is truly back is here because the BP Annual is here. So, I wrote the, Washington Nationals essay. Boy, I did not think I was going to get there, but I wrote the Washington Nationals essay this year, and I wrote some player comments on the Orioles, and there's obviously a lot of Phillies content in there as well. So please get your season started with the Baseball Prospectus Annual.
I will be interested to read what you wrote about the Washington Nationals and pass it along to my son, who obviously, as everybody who's been listening to this podcast knows, is a rabid Nationals fan. I think I read somewhere today, when they were winning the World Series in 2019, there was something like 8 or 9 media outlets covering the Nationals on a regular basis, and that number is now down to 1. The Athletic, I don't think, has any reporters, any beat reporters for the Nationals right now. The Washington Post just laid off their beat reporters. Everybody's independent. It's MLB.com, I think, is the only one that has a Nationals reporter right now. So it's gloomy. It's gloomy around the Nats.
Well, not to fit too perfectly into that, but I will tell you one of the main elements of my Washington Nationals essay is death. So that's something
Why am I not surprised, Justin? I'm not surprised at all. I'm not surprised at all. That tracks. That tracks.
To your point about, just real quick about Washington Nationals reporters, I do want to say, one of the victims of the Washington Post layoffs was Andrew Golden, who we have had on this show before, who is a Washington Nationals beat writer. Does a fantastic job and was a great guest to have on. So obviously among a legion of journalists without a home at the moment, but definitely a guy who you should look forward to writing about baseball in the future because he's definitely one of the good ones.
Absolutely. And, we'll have those guys. We'll have some of those guys on again during the course of the season as we do some national. We get ready. We're going to be talking to some of the folks who cover some of these other teams as we get ready to go here during the course of the season to kind of give you a little bit of an eye on the enemy, to steal a line from my old Eagles podcast, to get you hooked up with a little bit of inside information on what's going on around the National League East and with some of the other National League contenders as we get closer to the regular season. But in the meantime, Dave Dombrowski and Rob Thompson spent a few minutes with some Zoom updates for members of the Phillies media. At first, the first thing on their mind was giving a Zack Wheeler update. And just so everybody has this little bit of information, it doesn't sound like there's any new news on Zack, but everybody sounds pretty optimistic still. Different reports noting that Rob Thompson said he won't be ready for opening day. So we can kind of put that to bed. Zack Wheeler will not be ready for opening day, according to the Phillies manager. That's no big surprise. Probably the smart thing to do. I mean, it's possible they could have maybe tried to, but no sense in doing that. Rob Thompson says they're hopeful he'll be back shortly after opening day. Now, Justin, that can mean any number of different things. Shortly after can be, a week or two after. It can be late April. It can be, like 3 or 4 weeks. It can be, sometime before Memorial Day in early May. But, when I hear shortly after, I'm thinking like a couple of weeks after opening day. And I don't want to, I don't want to put too artificial a timeline on it because I don't have any idea what Rob Thompson means by this. But it sounds like the Phillies are just kind of also taking it as it comes. But it's their way of saying they feel pretty optimistic that, maybe he only misses a small handful of starts at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's generally, that they're gonna escape as much clarity as they can here because to a certain extent what they know, even though being on the inside is limited in a case like this. However, that they're willing to even put it out there that he could be available, that they plan for him to be available, not long after opening day is really encouraging. And yeah, I'm with you. I mean, that's an ambiguous statement you throw out there when you're like, yeah, I mean, it could be very soon to kind of soon. It's soon has its own little barometer of soonness that we're saying.
It's kind of like when my kids ask, when can we play video games? Like soon, mm-hmm. Which means hours from now, right. It's not happening soon. It's my way of telling you not now. So there's a whole different, there's a spectrum of of soons.
Well, it's like Matt Damon on 30 Rock when he was like, he was an airline pilot. He's like, you say we're going to be taking off in about 30 minutes because it's the amount of time people understand. It's tolerable, but also long enough that they're going to have to wait. So you just, the Phillies are just pulling one of those. They're like,
that's right.
Relatively soon. They use the right words. They use the right words to say like, not long after. Mm-hmm. It sounds really not bad. And it's really important. And I know we're going to get into that, I think, in the days ahead. But I think that was ultimately for as little specificity as you were going to get out of this report whenever it came. I think this is pretty much exactly what you wanted to hear, other than Zack Wheeler's fine and ready to pitch on opening day. Like, that would have been earth-shattering if that was the actual update. So this is I think this is a realistically positive update to the Zack Wheeler situation.
Dave Dombrowski also said the Phillies will look for starting pitching depth this spring, anticipates there will be more trade activity than usual with the late developing free agent market. Bob Nightingale with that with the relaying of that information from the Dave Dombrowski.
He's going slop hunting.
Yeah.
I think everybody should just this is going to get played up a little bit. I think we're going to get like at least one little belch from like a national writer or something, or somebody who's getting fed something, and you're just going to get like an afternoon where people get a little more excited than they need to be about the Phillies shopping for starting pitching talent. But I think your expectations here should be very low.
Yeah.
And I've been bringing this up because I think this is a very important part of this season, and it's great to hear what we've heard about Zack Wheeler, but this team needs some fortification as far as starting pitching goes, regardless of how positive the Wheeler update was. So
right.
We'll see, but I'm not expecting to be thrilled by what happens next.
Sure. I mean, because I think, they've got Taijuan Walker, who they're paying a lot of money to. And if it's just making a few starts, I don't think that they feel like, oh, gosh, there's a hole. No. We have to fill it. This is more for depth. I mean, Taijuan Walker will slide in as the number 5 or the number 4. You're going to have Aaron Nola, and just, you really keep your fingers crossed that Aaron Nola bounces back and is fine. You know, I'm not looking for an all-star season. I just fine. I need Aaron Nola to be fine this year because you got Chris Sanchez, Jesus Luzardo, and Andrew Painter. We're going to talk a little bit about here in the podcast as well. But I mean, all those guys are earmarked for regular slots in the starting rotation, and then so you are going to probably bring in somebody. I mean, I think Walker Buehler did pretty well in his cup of coffee with the team last year. He's not somebody I'd want to go run and start in a huge game someplace during the pennant race or in the playoffs, but for what they need, that seems like the kind of guy that would make a whole lot of sense to bring him back. And if you wanted somebody with a little bit more of a splash type of signing, and we talked about him a couple of weeks ago, Max Scherzer is probably going to be looking for a 1-year deal. Now, I don't know how much money that at this point he can command. It would be more than Walker Buehler, and frankly, in terms of the overall production you're going to get out of those two guys, Buehler probably makes more financial sense than Max Scherzer, but I think Scherzer gives you a little bit more upside. And he gives you a little bit more in the clubhouse too, I think. I've never liked Max Scherzer all that much on his act and all that nonsense, but I'd be willing to stifle that for a season if he comes on board. But I think that's kind of what we're talking about. It might even be something even lower tier than Walker Buehler. It's not going to be something that blows your hair back. You're right.
No, and I've seen it suggested out there. I mean, the Buehler name is circulating. I think people are kind of even getting attached to that as an idea, where I've seen people suggest, oh yeah, bring in Buehler and don't even say like this is just for support. Bring in Buehler and plan for him to split starts with Andrew Painter. And you're like, oh boy. Like, I don't think that's how the Phillies want to approach Andrew. I think they want to believe like, oh yeah, no, he's going to come out and look like a starter and begin. The
only way you do that is if you're concerned about innings. You know what I mean? Like and you want to have him go. You want him to be there at the end of the season. That's the only reason you would do what you suggest.
You might wind up filling that role anyway, whether you plan for it or not, in one way or another. Like that's just kind of what that role is. So, yeah, I mean. The Scherzer thing, I know we brought it up a couple of times. It really just is because his name's still on a list, on like the free agency list, and the Phillies are saying they're going to be looking. But ultimately, I don't even think this is an area where the Phillies they don't like to get cute with this kind of stuff.
No, that's not a Dombrowski move. No,
they won't. They wouldn't do something just to be like, well, it's this guy or this guy. This guy's going to cost a little more. And think about what people will like talk about, like for an afternoon, will dominate the news cycle. Like I just don't think they think like that. And as like funny or fun it would be to like. Just see ultimately what is like throwing a box full of squirrels into your clubhouse by bringing Max Scherzer in there. It's just like, yeah, this is funny. It's great. I mean, I'm all for it. It's just not, it's just not the Phillies MO. You're going to wind up getting a guy that maybe you've heard of. Like, I feel like that's very possible, but a guy who's like great 12 years ago or something, like that's more of a Dombrowski move, I think, at this point. So, that all hoping for something interesting, but ultimately this is not typically a place where the Phillies get very interesting.
Yeah. Another thing, as we are getting ready for spring training and pitchers and catchers reporting, a lot of players are already in Clearwater, by the way. But I mean, everybody's going to be showing up over the next few days.
Grinding.
Who? Yeah.
Aaron Nola's down there grinding.
Yes, he is. Get after it. Get after it, young man. Dave Dombrowski said, the Phillies are still doing everything they can to move Nick Castellanos before camp begins. Nick Castellanos here on February 9th, as pitchers and catchers are reporting to Clearwater, still a member of your Philadelphia Phillies. We're talking about this outfield. Like, what a disastrous outfield. Nick Castellanos is still technically a Phillies outfielder, friends. But Dave Dombrowski says the Phillies are doing everything they can to move Nick Castellanos before camp begins. I mean, when your general manager comes out and says, we're doing everything we can to move this guy before the start of spring training, there's no way he's staying on the Phillies during spring training. So they said a change of scenery via a trade or a release is still the plan ahead of spring training. But Justin, I mean, I don't know, Dave Dombrowski thinks that some team's going to panic and offer you something to take Nick Castellanos off your hands. I mean, if somebody didn't bite by now, I don't see what's happening next.
What is doing everything we can look like here? Truly, like he's just sitting next to a phone waiting for it to ring? Is he like, fine, take $10 of what he is owed and pay that, and we will pay the rest? Like, is there like a big pride thing factoring into this? Where they're like, no, the person who gets him needs to pay a little bit of his salary, so that we don't look totally stupid. But I don't think anybody, certainly no Phillies fans are going to mind that. The Phillies aren't going to be like, that's stupid. I mean, you have the people who already feel that Dombrowski screwed up by acquiring Castellanos in the first place, which I think is, folly, certainly. And just hindsight being 2020 or, and disregarding what value he has had for this team before he was the worst outfielder defensively in baseball. But ultimately, you got to wonder what this looks like when the Phillies are trying to get rid of a guy who statistically didn't make himself super appealing, who doesn't have, as far as we know, any noted suitors, who, maybe you could see like filling a certain role on a couple of low-tier rosters, but who ultimately, like I said, didn't make himself that much of a draw and is owed so much money that the team is struggling to get rid of him. But I'm with you though. The Phillies are just out there saying like, look, we won't be caught dead with Nick Castellanos on this roster come opening day. So this is happening. And you're like, okay. Yeah. You say that, but, there he is.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, a team like the Pirates, a team like the Royals, there are teams out there that would, I don't even know what the Rays would do at this point with anybody they got. I don't know their roster top to bottom off the top of my head, but...
How are you not on the phone with the Pirates? You just said this is the perfect deal. Yeah. This is very much a Pirates deal. I'm not saying it's what they need or it would be good for them. I'm saying they're out here trying to be like, we're in on some stuff. We're like making some noise. They are, of course, not. They have like not two, but like a pretty steady pipeline of young pitchers, led by Paul Skeens and Bubba Chandler.
They've got the number one farm system in baseball.
Yeah, they have plenty of that, but this like, we're going to get Ryan O'Hearn and we're not done. And then it's like February and they're like, okay, so it is just Ryan O'Hearn so far. But then look at this, Nick Castellanos, former all-star Nick Castellanos, guy people have heard of, totally available. Yeah, you got to pay some money, but like, he's around. It feels like this is the kind of guy that the Pirates would tout as like we got like a difference maker. We got Nick Castellanos.
A veteran voice in the clubhouse. Winning comes from a winning culture thing. Yeah.
He knows how to talk with those young kids. I mean, here's the thing. He kind of does, based on what we've heard. That's something that he was, one of these years, he was said to be good at. I don't know if that mood just left him at some point in Philadelphia, but maybe going to a new place. Because I do love that they keep bringing up what a great change of scenery candidate he is. Like, it's such a polite baseball way to say, like, this is clearly like no one is happy. Like, yes, change of scenery, but also change of guy for the Phillies is also necessary as well.
Yeah. Change of expectations, probably more than change of scenery when it comes to somebody like Nick Castellanos going someplace else. The other piece of news that Dave Dombrowski talked, I guess he was asked about the Phillies' first round pick last year, Gage Wood, and Dombrowski is essentially saying he could be a fast mover through the organization. Now, we had heard that last year. There was some wild speculation when he was drafted that, like, hey, could maybe even he pitch in the bullpen last year, because he'd had some success as a closer in college, and he had a tremendous finish to his college career. And he's got a plus fastball right now that he's said to have two pretty gosh darn good pitches right now that you might be able to put him in a major league bullpen right now. So Dave Dombrowski is very high on Gage Wood, was talking a lot about him. He only threw 40 innings last year, which Dombrowski noted and said, we'd kind of have to be careful of that. We'd have to be careful of his innings and his workload and everything else. But the intention is for Gage Wood to be developed as a starting pitcher. And it sounds like he'll probably start in high A, but it looks as though Dombrowski is kind of earmarking him as a guy who could move through the organization rather quickly. And so I don't know if that means the majors this year. It doesn't mean the majors as a starter, I'm sure, but maybe he makes his way to AA or makes his way to AAA, and as a way of limiting innings, he's in the bullpen in the second half of the year. I mean, that's the thing, is when you've got a guy with so little innings the season before, it's hard to know what kind of a plan to have for him, especially if you want to develop him as a starting pitcher. Sounds like he'd probably be like a 3-inning start guy, like I think they did with Andrew Painter and some of the other guys over the course of the last couple of years. But did any of the Gage Wood comments perk your ears up, Justin?
It's just kind of the move now. We don't need to relitigate everything the Phillies have kind of just done this offseason, the bumps in the road, the various zigging and zagging. But they have come at the end of it to a point where, what we really need to do is get our younger players involved. And, Dombrowski was saying that earlier in the offseason than, in the pre-Bichette days still. but they kind of are. They were already at that point where it was like, look, we have some young guys. We need to start getting into the mix here. And Gage Wood is outside of that top 3, but he still very much qualifies for that. Like you said, there was already talk of him being a factor on the major league team last year when he was drafted. So if the Phillies had been, a combination of more willing or had more options, maybe we are talking about like some very finessed major league bullpen construction or building or pitching staff, some sexy acquisitions out there. But as it came down to it, I do think they did a pretty good job with the bullpen, but they also are just going to have this focus on like, what can we use from these young guys who are already here and around? We need to start making, like, if they're going to be a team that's not willing to spend the most every time, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but is occasionally
there's only 2 teams that are able to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, then you got to be able to rely on your younger players. And the Phillies might be here out of like, maybe it's a sort of a plan B-ish situation. And then maybe they have, the higher expectations than they should or lower expectations than they should based on what they've been seeing. But they have some good young talent that's at least worth giving a shot at this point. And frankly, they also need to fill in where they kind of need some support. Like they could really use, like, coming out of this and seeing like an effective Andrew Painter and a Gage Wood that can give you like 3 innings, like you said, even just like a 3-inning sample size. Like that's gonna be a success this year. Like, so any help they can get from these guys, they're gonna focus on. I think that's kind of where their emphasis is going to lie here. It's gonna be like, what can we get out of the Gage Woods, and then maybe we take a look at this market.
Yeah, I think how they use their minor leaguers this year and how they move them through the system is going to be a really interesting thing to watch. Guys like, and we're going to talk about some of these guys when we look at the non-roster invitees to spring training, but like an Arun Escobar, what do they do with him? Dante Nori, what do they do with him this year? Some of those guys as they're making their way up and down through the minors.
It feels like last year, the idea of Justin Crawford or Aiden Miller or Andrew Painter, like becoming a member of this major league team and making an impact of any kind was like, yeah, this would be a cool thing that could happen. And this year that's being treated more as like, this is kind of like part of the plan. Like
this has to happen.
This kind of has to happen. At least one of these guys has to like work out so that we can kind of check that box. So I think it's a little more essential this year that those guys, somebody finds something that works.
Yep, 100% agree. Absolutely. They need some youth into this roster, and it's not coming from the outside. It's going to have to come from the inside. And so, that's kind of that's a big question mark heading into 2026 is the youth and how that factor is going to play into it and how much the Phillies get out of some of their younger players this year. And we kind of wanted to just talk about some of our biggest Phillies question marks for the 2026 season as we head into spring training. I've got a list of 10, but we're not going to go through all 10. That would take forever. But I figure let's just take like a couple of these that we feel like are the most important Phillies questions here as we get ready for pitchers and catchers reporting to Clearwater this week. And Justin, I think you have the list in front of you. I think you're looking at what I wrote down there. Which of those questions to you do you feel like is one of the biggest things that needs to be answered right now, or maybe you just truly don't have an idea which direction it's going to go? Where do you want to start?
Well, I'm going to start with one that I think we have the answer to. And you might even be able to guess which question I'm thinking of when I say that. But I've been focusing a lot of my, concerns on starting pitching. And, we talked about Zack Wheeler, and it was very positive. It's great to hear today. I have no reason to think anything other than positive thoughts right now about that situation. But it is still concerning that, like, the Phillies' true difference maker as far as the pitching staff goes is, facing the recovery this year that he is going to face. And so it does put greater pressure on the guys behind him in what was the team's strongest asset last year, its rotation. So when you have a question on this list of biggest Phillies question marks, that is Aaron Nola cooked? Here's the thing. We know the answer to this. And I'm going to confidently tell you that, yes, Aaron Nola is cooked, by which I mean, you're never going to, I don't think the days of seeing, like, you can look at his baseball reference page and see the little all-star and, what was 2015 was his big year as a starting pitcher that kind of like, was it 2015?
2018.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yes, sir.
Those round numbers throw me every time.
Like that.
2018. That was his big year. That Aaron Nola. Yeah, that's cooked. that Aaron Nola, I don't think is coming back. I think if you get a solid year out of Aaron Nola, you're looking at a guy like, if he has like a 3.80 ERA after 25 starts, that's
I'll take it.
I have not spent most of the year complaining about Aaron Nola if that has happened. So I think to be able to look at some of these questions and know we have an answer for one of them is actually more valuable. So I think that one we know. Aaron Nola's cooked. That it's not 2018 Aaron Nola. He's never coming back. He's going to be the kind of pitcher he is. He's got a higher ceiling than some of these stretches he'll fall into. But that version of Aaron Nola is cooked, and you got to just adjust. You got to just prepare for that reality.
It's a lot of money for a number 4 starter, which is what it kind of sounds like we're describing here, as somebody
kind
who's
of thought this was not going to be as sharp a decline, I think, and when everybody was like clamoring for this, but everyone else would go back to that point, including us, when they had to choose what to do about that extension, and we all said they should do it because the other options out there weren't any more appealing, but also I think nobody thought that, again, he was going to struggle as much as he has. So nobody saw. I mean, and 2025 was so far beyond the worst expectations we had for him. I mean, he's been a frustrating pitcher throughout his time in Philadelphia, but he's had a tremendous amount of success, and that's been the frustrating part. Is like you see a guy who can literally dominate any lineup for stretches for multiple starts at a time, and then even in a start itself, mow through the lineup, take out the first 15 guys 8 by strikeouts, and then blow up for a 5-run inning from out of nowhere. Like, it's just he's always been so frustrating. And so after the Phillies have had like a 6-run rally, suddenly they're losing 8-6 by the end of the inning. You're like, what happened?
And it just, I think it was disconcerting last year how he never ever found a groove last year. There was no point last season where you thought, okay, here's a month where Aaron Nola finally figured it out. Or like the last month of the season, he really turned around. That never happened. It never happened. Now, he did pitch well in that very shortened outing in Los Angeles in the playoffs in Game 3. That was a positive finish to the season. I think in his final start of the season too, he pitched really well, if I'm remembering correctly. I think I shut out through like 6 innings or 5 innings or whatever it was. I forget. But it was like a good stepping stone to the playoffs. But you're really hunting for good news when you're getting excited about that. Here's
one for you. And there's plenty of stats like this, I think, all over whatever sheet you're looking at for Aaron Nola. But as far as like the outcome regarding the pitchers' wins in a couple of starts, he went 5-10 last year, and in the 5 wins, the 5 games where he was awarded a pitching win, his ERA was under 2, and in the 10 losses, his ERA was over 8.30. Now, I know like there's going to be some skewing here based on just like the sort of splits you're looking at here for any pitcher, but I'm going to guess that's kind of an extreme example of that. And it's telling you that like when the losses happen, they happen hard. So again, we know Aaron Nola's cooked. At least 2018 Aaron Nola's cooked, but you got to hope you get like a quality number 4 starter performance from him, at least until Wheeler gets back.
And my definition of cooked is like unpitchable. At this point, like last year, he was cooked. He was unpitchable. Like you just couldn't keep running him out there. An ERA in the mid 6s is just not. You can't be a first place team and continue to run that guy out there every 5th day. And it's just so I don't believe we're going to see that again. So I'm not ready to say he's cooked, because when I'm thinking of cooked, I'm thinking done. But you're right, he's cooked as a top of the rotation starter. I'm hoping for an ERA like what you talked about, something in the upper 3s. If you can get an upper 3 ERA from Aaron Nola this year, I think that's a win. I think it's a victory for you. And I wouldn't say in that case that he's cooked. I would say in that case that, he's certainly on the downslope of his career, and, he's no longer the top of the rotation starter that they paid for 2 off seasons ago. But yeah, I think I'd put the odds at total cookage at like 25%. Would you say the odds are of another Aaron Nola season like last year? I'm putting it at like 25% chance. I think it's more like a 75% chance he's a good bit better this year.
I'll go as high as 35 or 40%. I'm down on Nola, man.
Yeah, I get it.
have been for a while. It's just,
I get it. I know.
I got to add that extra 10, 15% because that's the Nola tax, man. I've seen too many of those games,
Yes,
too many of those starts.
Yes, it is. That's the Nola tax. All right, I'm going to give one here. And, I think we had talked a little bit about Zack Wheeler. One of my questions was, what will Zack Wheeler look like and when will he be ready? I mean, if they get a truly effective Zack Wheeler at the top of the rotation, giving you ace level type performance, and then you have Christopher Sanchez and Jesus Luzardo going 1, 2, 3, suddenly this season looks and feels a lot better. I don't know that the odds are great that happens. I think we don't know what Zack Wheeler will look like when he comes back, and we don't know exactly when he will be ready. But I'm holding out hope that the top of the rotation continues to, that Zack Wheeler comes back and looks like he did last year before he got hurt. Now, he did struggle right before he got hurt a little bit, and it's probably because he was dealing with the injury that, or some kind of injury that we had been speculating about. But I think the one that everybody... Go ahead, yeah.
I was going to say, do you think at the trade deadline, if you're dealing with, off and on Zack Wheeler in the first half, once he comes back, and you're not really relying on Aaron Nola, he's not having a great first half either. Do you think they go hunting for a bigger name starting pitcher at the trade deadline?
It really kind of depends on, I think, what the prospects are doing, if they'd even be able to. I would agree with you. I think they would try. But, Andrew Painter is not going to be a trade chip this year. Like, he's either going to be really good in your starting rotation and something you're building around, or he's not going to be effective and he's not going to have the trade value that you need to have, right? I mean, and same thing with Justin Crawford. I mean, I think we're past the point of using those two guys in particular as trade chips. Now you've kind of committed to them you need them to be productive major league players. So you're leading a trade with Aiden Miller, and then you're kind of seeing how some of the other prospects develop, like an Escobar, like Rincones. He's not, anything tremendous, but, maybe he brings you some value there. But I mean, I don't know if you're looking for somebody for like a top of the rotation there. I don't know that you have I don't know that you have the horses, but I would say that you probably are looking there. Yeah, you probably are looking there.
Yeah, I mean, you'd almost, if you're taking yourself seriously as a contender, you'd almost have to be.
Yeah.
If you're not getting what you need from your two guys signed to be like, 1 and 2 for a long time, then it might be worth, taking a peek. But I can also see, like you said, every question like that, and I keep forgetting this, every question like that has to pass through the filter of it depends on what the young guys are doing. Because again, that is where the focus is for the Phillies right now.
Well, and I think that's going to be, one of my next big questions that I think is going to be a major part of the story is the rookies. Can Justin Crawford play a high level center field, and can Andrew Painter recover from a down 2025? They are really counting on these two kids, and they're trying to tell us, no, you're not putting too much pressure on them. That's not all about them. We've got the stars, they need to perform, and all of that is very true. But we've also seen what the lineup after Turner, Harper, Schwarber looks like. We've seen it for the last couple of years. I'm not expecting a major transformation. I'm not expecting Bohm and Garcia and Real Muto and Stott to all of a sudden, blossom into, have a renaissance or anything like that. I'm expecting what we've been getting, and that they're number 6 and 7 hitters throughout the course of the rest of that lineup. So Justin Crawford is really going to be an important part of an outfield that a lot of us are really down on and seeing as one of the maybe bottom third outfields in Major League Baseball, if not worse than that. And then with Andrew Painter, he's replacing Ranger Suarez in the rotation, and they're going to tell you up and down he's not replacing Ranger Suarez. He's a rookie. Where he can't. But Ranger Suarez left. Andrew Painter is being added in. That's the difference in the starting rotation. So yes, Andrew Painter is replacing Ranger Suarez. And so in order for this rotation to be, like you talked about, Justin, to be effective, kind of needs to be in and around Ranger Suarez numbers. I'm sorry to say that, but, I know people are going to yell at me for that. But, if he's got an ERA of 5, you're really going to get hurt by that. Because, again, you don't know what you have in Wheeler and Nola and everything else. So the two rookies and then Aiden Miller on the farm, do they play him in a different position? When will he come to Philadelphia? Will they be playing him at third? Will they be playing him in left? Could he come up mid-season and you trade Alec Bohm at the trade deadline or something like that? I mean, here's the other thing. I don't think we've talked a lot about Alec Bohm being traded. I don't think people think he's all that good. Otherwise, there would have been an Alec Bohm trade at this point. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know. I think the young guys, it's a really important part of this bridge to the next era of Phillies baseball, where you've got these older guys and they're still being productive, but you're trying to set yourself up so that you don't go through another 2012 to 2018 type scenario.
Yeah, and I'll sit right in the middle of that question. Like, will Justin Crawford be able to play at a high level? I will. I'll take the coward's route and say that. Look, I don't think high level is even fair. But I will go back to the well that I've been pulling stuff out of for a couple of weeks now, and just say I think he is going to look like a at times very good young player. Between the hiccups and between the adjustments he has to make playing at this level, I think you're going to see moments where there is a very good young player who is in the Phillies outfield, and he's going to make a couple of plays, maybe get a couple of hits, and remind people that yes, even though there was this kind of there was I'm not even going to call it negativity, just more talk about his flaws than his strengths, which are both numerous, but both exist. And I think you're going to see a couple of glimpses of his skills, like, his raw speed and his ability to catch up with the ball, or, his improved ability to track the ball, or his improved ability to get the ball off the ground. And, again, seeing that speed when he runs the bases as much as he's playing on defense, I think you're going to get some looks at that. And that's going to wind up being pretty exciting for people. And if other things are going well that need to go well, if you're getting a Bryce Harper season out of Bryce Harper, then you can have a center fielder who is learning to play center field for the first time and has all of the, adjustments and statistical issues thereof, but at the same time has a high ceiling, and you want to give him that chance. So I think this is the time. This is the time for Justin Crawford. This is when he is getting the opportunity that he has earned, even if he is not, a guy that's setting a ton of nationally ranked prospect rankings on fire, even if he's not a high pick for national rookie of the year contenders, year contenders. Like, even if that's not the case, you're still going to get glimpses of what made this guy the top outfield prospect for the Phillies, the top position playing prospect for the Phillies for a while. You're going to see that, and it's going to be, that I think will do a lot for people. That's why I said before, I want to see him do like one or two things really right on opening day that are just completely counterintuitive to the flaws that have come to define him, just so people see that, like, no, he can do it. Yeah. But he's going to be learning. And I don't think it's fair to say, like, no, he needs to be a high functioning center fielder by July or the season's over.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too with Andrew Painter is he has the chance. We were talking about him as a top of the rotation type starter even 2 years ago when it was first rumored that he would be coming up. He has the chance to be that guy. Like, and that would be a enormous boon. And I'm just, man, I get tired of, and I know it's not fair to rookies to expect too much of them, but man, I want to stop being told, don't, lower your expectations on the rookies, man, I want maybe it's okay to expect a lot from a much heralded rookie pitcher that you've been touting for all of this time and refused to trade. Maybe it's okay that I'm expecting him to be a really good pitcher pretty quickly, that I shouldn't be okay if his ERA is like in the upper fours here in his rookie season. If it happens, it happens. And it doesn't mean that he's not going to be a good pitcher, but I think I can be disappointed in that, given all the hype. So, I want to do, I think one of the other questions to mention here, Justin, and it's, we're a good 35 minutes into this podcast now. We haven't talked about Bryce Harper at all. I think one of the big questions here in 2026 is, will Bryce Harper be more impactful? Will he be elite? Will he get back to being eliter than he certainly was a season ago?
And I think anybody that considers this to be the most important question is completely valid. There's a couple, probably most of these questions you could make an argument is the most important one, but
yeah,
this is probably, of those, one of other than Wheeler, probably the best argument to make as far as the Phillies' success in 2026. I mean, hey. Look, man, we all know how this soap opera started this year, but the fact of the matter is that Dave Dombrowski didn't say anything incorrect, objectively, about Bryce Harper in that end-of-season press conference. And I'll tell you what else. One of these other questions you have on here is, like, where's the power going to come from in this lineup? this is the same question, frankly.
Yeah.
Obviously, you got Schwarber in there for a reason. And you know what? I'm going to throw Adolis Garcia a bone here, too, because if he's here to do one thing, it's hit home runs in that lineup. Indeed. So, like, there's some power right there. But also, Harper's got to be that power. You know who led this team in slugging percentage in 2022? It was Harper. 2023, same guy. 24, same guy. Even with Kyle Schwarber in that lineup. Last year, it was Schwarber. But Harper was number 2. That's where a lot of the Phillies' power has come from every year since they've started going back to the playoffs. And if you're not getting that, then A, it's got to be coming from somewhere else, or B, you got to be making up for that shortcoming with a bigger strength somewhere else, you know, even if it's in the bullpen or whatever, like that's got to be reached. You know, that level somewhere needs to be reached. And you might as well just have Harper doing it, because apparently, you know, it's the biggest insult in the world to suggest that he is not capable of doing that anymore. So, okay, glad to hear that. Let's see it. You know, let's go out there and let's see it. If not elite is something that you need to motivate yourself, great. Go nuts. I want to see those power numbers back where they need to be for this offense to be functioning the way it needs to function. So yeah, that is I would say critical is the role of Bryce Harper's being more of an impact bat in 2026.
Yeah, and without a doubt, I think, and that probably is. I mean, aside from the pitching, it's always about starting pitching in the regular season. But if you're looking at the offense, I mean, you can talk about Bohm, you can talk about Stott, you can talk about Real Muto. If Bryce Harper has an elite level type season, this whole thing runs different. And so, yeah, I think it's obviously a huge question mark. And he's obviously going to be somebody that everybody's watching pretty closely this spring. It'll be interesting to hear his first comments when he comes to Clearwater. And by the way, the position players aren't scheduled to be in until Monday. So, but I mean, a lot of these guys are going to filter through and have already been filtering into Clearwater over the next few days. It's likely that Harper and those guys will come in over the next few days, but we might not hear from anybody until next week. So, real quick to finish up, Justin, I just kind of wanted to run down the names of the non-roster invitees to spring training. These are guys who are not on the 40-man roster, but have been invited to take part in spring training and perhaps win a spot with the club somehow. There are 4 left-handed pitchers. Genesis Cabrera, who I believe is the pitcher who didn't he injure Bryce Harper by hitting him with a pitch at some point, or was it?
Yes. I brought this up a couple episodes
That's right,
ago.
You did.
He was the guy on the Cardinals. He hit Bryce Harper in the face, and then he was taken out of the game, and then he hit Didi Gregorius right after that. And Phillies fans, including like beat writers, were ready to
get this guy out. I remember that now.
Yeah, this cannot continue.
Yeah, get him out. He's lost it. All right, some other guys, left-hander Tucker Davidson, Tim Miza, who we had looked at last year when they signed him as a potential guy in the bullpen as a lefty. I think, we'll talk about it in a second. And Andrew Walling, another left-handed pitcher. Right-handers Andrew Bechtold, Jonathan Hernandez, Michael Mercado, Trevor Richards, and Bryce Wilson. There are 5 catchers who are going to be in camp that are non-roster invitees. Ketan Hittinger, Mark Colazavari, Paul McIntosh, Renee Pinto, and Caleb Ricketts. I've heard of his name before. A few infielders, Keaton Anthony, Christian Cairo, Carson DiMartini, Arun Escobar, Aiden Miller, Leover Peguero, Brian Rincon, and Jose Rodriguez. And then there are a few outfielders, Dylan Campbell, Justin Crawford, who's not on the 40-man, Brian De La Cruz, Dante Nori, and Felix Reyes, who plays both infield and outfield. Obviously, Justin Crawford, Aiden Miller are the big names on that list, and we've talked a lot about them already. Any of those other names perk up your ears, Justin? Any of these guys you think have a chance of making an impact?
Yeah, I mean, an impact doesn't have to be the biggest impact. It could be like, you're Cal Stevenson, and you have the best weekend ever coming up.
Buddy Kennedy.
Yeah, you just happen to be on one that weekend, and it gets everybody's attention. I think of these names, I think Tim Miza can be a guy who comes up and has a significant stretch with the Phillies. Honestly, Genesis Cabrera could wind up playing a similar kind of role, being a lefty. And I know he's here and he's on a minor league deal, so we're not even dealing with the Genesis Cabrera who might have been as big of an impact guy as he was before when he was hitting the Phillies with pitches. But still, his thing is, velo, and it'd be cool or at least interesting to see him come up to the major league level and pull something off. I have this idea that, first of all, these 5 catchers here, by the way, nothing says we sure did have to re-sign JT Realmuto than looking at these 5 catchers that are on the NRI list. But I will say that I have this thing about that since the Phillies acquired Paul McIntosh, I don't think he's going to be like an impact player, but I could see him popping up out of some emergency at the catching position and just like hitting a 450-foot home run and then going back to the minors and maybe never even being in the major leagues again after like one weekend. But he is the kind of player, like that's how he profiles. It's like he can do that, but he probably won't. So, that's why he's in the minors. And then other than that, I wanted to mention Felix Reyes because I bookmarked his name as soon as Matt Winkelman mentioned him, because Matt Winkelman said, and I want to make sure I get this quote right, so bear with me 1 second. Someone is going to fall in love with the way Felix Reyes hits and write a totally irresponsible column about it, and it is going to be wonderful. It is rare to look at the invite list and not have a single problem with it. Yeah, and then he goes into talking about the entire NRI list and says, like, look, there's no questionable snubs here. You kind of laugh at this list to an extent, but these are the guys the Phillies should have invited. So, like, getting the Winkelman thumbs up there is good news. But also just, Reyes specifically is funny because he is. And spring training is the time that he is going to stir up that trouble if he's going to do it. And that's going to be really interesting. And despite all of that, despite the irresponsible column we're waiting to see when it comes, it will come. It might be me who writes it. We'll see. But regardless, that still gives him a chance to, make an impact of some kind on the major league level. So, I want to make sure I mentioned his name because I think people are going to get good and excited about an infield outfield guy who gets into a couple of balls through spring training.
Yeah. And I'll mention a couple other guys. I think all those names are right. Tim Meiza was one that I had earmarked as well. Brian De La Cruz is another guy that people are going to be talking a lot about. The MVP in the Dominican Winter League. We've talked about him a little bit here on the podcast. He does have power. He has hit for power in the majors, but it's been an all power, low average, a lot of strikeouts kind of guy. But he had his best offseason in quite a while. He's been playing in the Dominican League every year over the last few years and never played very well. So because we're so desperate for right-handed hitting outfielders with some pop, there's going to be a lot of eyes on Brian De La Cruz. And I certainly think that, if Otto Kemp gets hurt or if there's some kind of massive slump with Otto Kemp in the majors this year as the one half of the platoon side with Brandon Marsh, would not be at all surprised unless Brian De La Cruz is tanking in Lehigh Valley that he doesn't get a phone call at some point in the majors and get a big hit here and there.
I'll tell you what, if Justin Crawford stumbles out the gate or we're not seeing the returns that we want to see through like the season's first half, I don't think this guy is going to impact the major league roster directly, but I think the name you're going to start seeing a little more is Dante Nori, who's kind of like the next man up as far as center field from the prospects goes. He is very defensive oriented, and I don't think his bat is highly valued at this point, and he's considered something of a high risk factor. Like, he doesn't have like a plus tool to fall back on yet. But then again, Winkelman doesn't put his estimated time of arrival in the major leagues till 2028. But he is a name I think you'll start seeing more of, where it's like, well, if Crawford doesn't seem like, if he feels like he's misfiring, then like, well, okay, who else is there if that's the focus? But then again, I don't think the Phillies will wait around until 2028 to find a center fielder, even if that's the case. Right. But he is certainly a name you'll see mentioned more.
Johan Rojas, still around. If Crawford stumbles, good old Johan, I get the feeling.
What's the issue? If Crawford stumbles, then like the ceiling of center field is once again pretty limited for another year. So
yeah, totally. All right, well, let's wrap up here, Justin, with our little spring training preview with some final thoughts. Any final thoughts before we say goodbye?
Absolutely. We got the Dirty Inning machine roaring back up last month. Nice. So 2 new episodes of the Dirty Inning over at the Patreon. We're going to do one of our next 2 episodes will be a World Baseball Classic episode, with that beginning March 5th in the current season. So I wanted to go back and talk about a fairly Dirty Inning branded game from 2009 that, I don't think it's necessarily going to involve a ton of Phillies, but it definitely qualifies for the overall baseball atrocity format that we talk about on that show. So that'll be exciting in the month ahead. And as we inch closer to baseball, there will be absolutely hammered episodes every week as well, as we talk about what exactly we expect from these Phillies, and hopefully a more positive light with the return of baseball, kind of giving a boost to everyone's, I think, morale as the weeks go by. Yeah,
the snow and the ice that's still around. I mean, I think we're going to start to see it go the next couple of days, but we definitely need some baseball to help artificially warm things up here in the Northeast. But just also want to remind folks that go to brooklinebooks.com and order yourself a copy of multiple copies of Summer of the Cheap Wieners, and give them to family and friends. But fantastic read from Justin that you're going to make sure you go get. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for this edition of Hittin' Season. You can watch, of course, this episode of the podcast over at the WHYY YouTube page. If you haven't subscribed to the WHYY YouTube page, what are you waiting for? Go over there and do that, and you get every one of our roundtable editions of the podcast on your smart TV or on your phone, wherever it is you watch your YouTube. And if you listen to this podcast only, of course, we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is you get your podcast. If you wouldn't mind leaving a 5-star rating at Apple Podcasts and let us know what you think of the show, that would go a long way. And you can also send us an email. You have something you want to tell us, something you want to talk about, hittinseason@billypenn.com. That is our email for the show, hittinseason@billypenn.com. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time right here on Hittin' Season.